So, previously on the book of Shmuel, part Bet, we saw a transformation. There was the David before he brought the Aron, who wasn't yet fully personally invested in Avodas Hashem to the nth degree. And then there was the David afterwards, the Mesiras Nefesh David, who realized that the only way to be king is to put all of his self into the Avodah, such that his Malchus, in effect, became nothing more than the conduit for the will of Hashem. We pointed out how this approach was contrasted with Michal, who was essentially a stand-in for Shaul, and Ishboshet, Mr. Cellophane. And then we concluded by saying that the way to accomplish this is through parrots-like behavior. This parrots-like behavior is through being like Uzzah, with Oz, with might. That comes from Boaz, and it leads to Aron Uzecha. One thing I neglected to mention last time is the source for this idea of Oz as a connection to Malchus really comes from Chana's fundamental prayer back in part Aleph in Parak Bet. So in Pasuk Yud over there, we have Hashem yechetu mirivo alav b'shamayim yiraim Hashem yadin afsei aretz v'yitain Oz l'malcho v'yarim kerem mishicho. Okay, this week we see the impact of the choices that David makes as it reverberates unto infinity, with David's line being chosen to be kings forevermore. Rather than a quote, I'm going to share with you an idea from Chinese history. There's a concept of what they call a mandate from heaven. This is my best Mandarin pronunciation here is Ting Ming, which is essentially the belief that the emperor is chosen by heaven to rule as long as he governs justly and virtuously. This concept is documented in the book of so-called documents, Shangshu, authored by Confucius and others over many generations. Okay. Without any further ado, we will start chapter 7. Do I have a reader? Okay.
Sure.
Oh, yeah?
And it was that when the king was sitting in his house and God gave him rest from all around from all of his enemies.
Okay, why is that important?
I wonder if this is like the
way he can get Nagul.
He can get what? Because he doesn't have anybody to deal with.
Because he can contemplate.
Okay.
Is this like the beginning of the Yesha and Yaakov thought he was going to be well settled? Because doesn't he have a lot more wars and stuff?
Yeah, he does have a lot more wars. So in Devarim chapter 12, we read the following. V'avartem es hayarden v'yashavtem be'eretz asher Hashem Elokechem manchil eschem v'hiniach lachem mikol oivechem misaviv v'yashavtem betach. Right? Hashem is going to give you safety from all of your enemies, and you're going to live in security. Then what are you supposed to do?
Build the Beit HaMikdash.
Build the Beit HaMikdash. V'haya makom asher yivchar Hashem Elokechem bo l'shaken shmo sham shama taviu es kol asher anochem mitzaveh eschem olosechem v'zivchechem, etc., as David said, build the Beit HaMikdash.
ויאמר המלך אל נתן הנביא ראה נא אנוכי יושב בבית ארזים וארון האלוהים יושב בתוך העירייה. And the king said to Natan Hanavi, okay, look please, I am sitting in the house of Arazim cedars, okay, and the ark of Hashem is sitting in betwixt the curtain.
Yeah, it's in a tent, right?
Hyria, I don't know how to translate that.
Yeah, the Yoshib B'toch Hayuriya abides in a tent. Okay. So we sort of on the sly here have met a new character.
Nothing.
Right. No introduction. Oh, by the way, there's a new Navi in town who is going to play a significant role in the rest of this book, and even unto the beginning of Sefer Malachim. There's just an assumption that Natan is already in the mix.
Oh, we know who he is.
Right.
Remember the new guy? Yomer Natan El Hamelech, Ko Asher Bilvavcha Lech Asay Ki Adonai Imach. And Natan said to the king, it doesn't say David anymore, interestingly.
Yeah. It
says to the king, all that's in your heart, go and do, because God's with you.
Okay, so was that God speaking, Natan speaking, both, neither?
I mean, he uses God's name, the Shem HaMeforash there, so I'm assuming this is a nevuah.
Okay.
But that doesn't make sense. Because
Why?
Hashem told them not to. He
What-
wasn't allowed to build. I
Wait,
mean,
you already know the end of the story.
No, but I mean, that's pretty well, I mean, it's a well-known thing.
hmm
I mean, you're asking the question, is this Nebuah? It would seem like he's clearly talking on his own.
It has to be that he's talking on his own because in a minute he's gonna have to walk it back, right?
You know that it wasn't allowed to.
Oh, there it is.
We're-
Right.
one second.
Wait a minute.
So Hashem is with him.
David says to Natan, I want to build this house for Hashem. Natan says, go do whatever you want. Hashem is with you. So me, the reader, not knowing the end of the story like Stephen does, I think God's on board, right?
Mhm.
Your question was who's saying this?
My question is, what's the source of what Natan is saying? Natan's saying these words. Is Natan speaking on behalf of God? He's introduced as a Navi.
He's speaking on behalf. Oh, he's speaking on behalf of an advisor.
It must be, right? It must be that he's speaking not on behalf of God, which is then a weird thing to say. It's one thing for Natan to say, you can do whatever you want, or let me go check with God, right? That's probably why you're talking to me, David, is because you want to know what God thinks, not what I, Natan, think.
Right.
He's basing it on the Hashem is with you. He's basing it on, he sees that David's doing really well.
Right.
He's saying, whatever you go and do, Hashem's with you. He seems to think that whatever David wants,
Okay.
carte blanche.
I'll throw out another question that's going to sound kind of like a stupid question, and maybe it is. Is there a commandment in the Torah to build a Beit HaMikdash? This is not a trick question. What do you think?
Yeah, based on what you just said.
Well,
But we just read some sukkim that made it
Yeah.
sound like you're supposed to build a place for me to
Yeah.
offer up your korbanos, right?
Right.
I mean, they were certainly commanded a Mishkan. So is that,
Okay.
I mean, as an outgrowth of the Mishkan type thing?
So
The Mishkan was
that's
That's
kind
the
of what
Torah.
I'm getting at. Meaning, we know for sure there's a commandment in the Torah to build a mishkan,
Mishkan.
right? So that means that any time that the Torah is talking about Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, right? That's not build me a Beit HaMikdash, that's build me a mishkan, because you're building it in the midbar, right? So you're kind of stuck either way. Either there's no commandment to build a Beit HaMikdash, in which case David is innovating something, and then we have to wonder why or how he's innovating it.
He's adding on.
He's adding on.
Yeah, there's the concept of the beautiful home for Hashem, and that's making it bigger. And is that you're saying like a base is bigger than Mishkan?
Beit HaMikdash is a permanent place.
Right,
It's
as
one
opposed to
place.
Mishkan.
It's only one place. It's not going anywhere.
Oh, all right. I mean,
Right? The Mishkan is portable.
Mishkan is portable, but
The Aron literally has stabs attached to it because it's supposed to move.
Okay.
So what you're saying is this is not a commandment from the Torah. This is David's innovation. David is coming up with a new idea. Hey, I'm in a home. God, you should have a permanent, non-movable home. I think that's a great idea. What do you think, God? Yeah, yes or no? More or less where we're at. Okay. So there's one technical problem with that, which is even if we say that it's a good idea, the Navi can't command it. Meaning you have the mitzvos in the Torah, and that's it. There's Nevi'im that come after Moshe are not allowed to innovate new laws. They can do what's called horat shah. They can give you a temporary disposition where you can dispensation to do X, Y, Z. Like Elio at Hara Carmel, he's like, we're going to bring a korban outside of the Beis HaMikdash. That's a one-time deal. But to do a permanent, like, we're going to make a new mitzvah that never existed before, from what Chazal say, it seems like you can't do that. Which means that you need to either figure out how the Mikdash is, like you were saying, an extension of the Mishkan, and therefore it's not a new mitzvah. And then if it's not a new mitzvah, you get the other side of the question, which is, well, then why do I have to ask? Right? If you, David, believe that
It's right in between. That's the problem.
I think
It's not
that-
innovation.
yeah.
It's not nothing. It's something.
it's something, but it's not, it doesn't rise to the level of new.
Correct.
It's just an extension. And that's why I still have to ask.
Of needing to ask.
Uh-huh.
If I were
Okay.
David, I'd be wary of doing anything.
That's a good answer.
Because look what happened with Uzzah.
You know, there are things, you know,
Right.
better be careful, better to ask.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Always ask.
This is definitely something that is not taken for granted,
Yeah.
right? It's not something that he could have just picked up a shovel and got started with. And we're going to see, even though it sounds like Natan's like, yeah, do whatever you want. You're the golden boy. That doesn't last very long. Okay, let's keep going.
It switches right now. Vayibalayla.
Yeah.
Vayihi balayla,
So there's the way this is written is intentional in the breaks in the psukim.
Unfortunate.
No. But right. Vayihi balayla hahu is almost like vayihi b'chatzi halayla. There is a stuma. This is unusual. There's a break in the middle of the pasuk, so it's there to build tension. It was that very night something changed.
Right. Vayihi balayla hahu, vayihi dvar Adonai el Natan lemor. Lech v'amarta el avdi el David. Ko amar Adonai ha'ata tibne li bayit l'shivti, ki lo yeshavti b'bayit.
Let's translate.
Okay. And it was on that very night that the word of Hashem came to Natan, saying, "Go and say to my servant, to David, thus says Hashem, will you build for me a house for me to live in? Ki lo yeshavti b'bayit l'miyom ha'aloti et b'nei Yisrael miMitzrayim v'ad hayom hazeh v'ayeh mithalech b'ohel u'mishkan." Because I have not lived in a house from the day that I brought the children of Israel from Mitzrayim until today, and I will be going in the tent and in the Mishkan.
In other words, what do you think you're doing?
Are you trying to nail me down?
Right. Are you doing something that I want? Where does this come from? I have not asked you to do this. I have never, and we're going to see that this kind of goes on. He lays it on pretty thick. I didn't ask for this. I've never asked for this. I've been in a Mishkan, and that's been the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu operates with the Jewish people. Where is this coming from, right? And like you were saying, this is sort of on the razor's edge of doing something that is innovative, but not too innovative.
He seems to say.
So is Natan's original comment not Nevuah?
It sounds like that.
It's just recording what he said.
What not right? What it was
What his
Natan's
gut
voice,
reaction.
not God's
Right.
voice.
Based on what Hashem said, Hashem seems to think there's a very big difference between the Mishkan and Beis Hamikdash.
Right.
Yeah. So not what I was saying. That's like this.
No, what I'm saying is from
Similar-
David's perspective, what he's trying to do is something that's different,
Right.
but he doesn't think it's so different that it's completely out of bounds. He's willing to
Right.
suggest it.
But Hashem
is like, wait a
it's
minute,
different.
where is this coming from? The reason this is so dangerous or tenuous is because when you allow people to put their own spin on religion, then you get into like solipsism and postmodern. Everybody can just do whatever they want, and it's fine, right? That's what the Bummos were. When you have your own private altar, so you have your own private religion, you do things your way, and he does, and everyone can just live in peace and harmony. No, there has to be bounds of what is acceptable and not acceptable.
But again, since we know the spoiler, we know that Hashem is going to tell him to build the Beis Hamikdash. Tell
No.
Shlomo to build the Beis Hamikdash. So we know in the end that Hashem doesn't really think. Thinks it's a good idea to have a permanent.
Wait, so let's get to that,
Okay.
because I think there's a
It seems to
process.
be-
I think what we're gonna see. You're right. Eventually, like spoiler alert, we build the Beis Hamikdash,
Yeah.
right? And Hashem is okay with it.
Right.
So then the question is going to be, how do we get from the initial response,
Yeah.
which is not interested, to yes, I'm interested, right? Something has to
Yeah.
change. There has to be a process.
Like generation, people talking about, Yaakov slept on Amari. Like this is was there any discussion about this? Also, this is like a brand new concept that David is introducing to Kleisel, or is it just like they talked about this in preschool? Like
Let's keep reading, because what Hashem seems to say is not that.
Okay. B'chol asher hithalachti b'chol bnei Yisrael hadavar dibarti et achad shivtei Yisrael asher tziviti lirot et ami et Yisrael lemor lama lo venitem li beit arazim. In all which I have gone with all the children of Israel the things that I've said to one tribe of Israel, to each tribe of Israel, that I commanded to see. That I commanded to see my people Israel saying.
To Osis Ami is to like shepherd my people, to lead my people.
Okay, saying, why have you not built for me a house of cedar?
In other words, there have been plenty of leaders of the Jewish people who have come before you. Not once did I mention like, hey, Shmuel would be a great example, or Eli or anybody else. How come you guys are not building me a Beis Hamikdash? I never did that, David. Maybe that implies that I had no interest in having that done.
Va'ata and Va'ata ko tomar la'avdi leDavid ko amar Adonai Tzavot ani lakachticha min hanave me'achar hatzon liyot nagid al ami al Yisrael. And now, this is what you'll say to my servant David. Says Hashem, the of legions. I took you from
pasture.
Sorry,
the pasture.
The pasture. Going after the flock, in order to be a prince amongst my people, on Israel.
Right. You came from nothing. I plucked you from obscurity to lead the Jewish people.
Right. Va'eyeh imcha b'chol asher halachta v'achrita et kol oivecha mipanecha ve'asiti lecha shem gadol kashem hagdolim asher ba'aretz. And I've been with you in all of your goings, and I cut down all of your enemies from before you. And I did with you, and I made you a big name, like the names of the big machers that are in the world.
Right.
V'samti makom la'ami liYisrael, v'netativ v'shachan tachtav, v'lo yirgaz od, v'lo yosifu v'nei avla la'anoto, kasher barishona. This one's tough. And I set my place for my people, for Israel, and plant them.
Mm-hmm. I planted them firmly so that they can dwell
under it.
Mm-hmm.
Lo yirgaz od, and they will not
tremble.
Oh, okay. Tremble further, and they will not continue to be frightened to punish them. Or
they won't be oppressed by evil people. Bnei Avla are people who do Avla.
Right, to oppress them like the old days.
Right. So I this is all me, meaning you think that this is your success, David. Remember, everything that you are, I brought you there, and then I took care of the fact that in Pasuk Aleph it says that everything is hunky-dory. That's not you, David, that now gets to decide you're building a house for me. I've orchestrated this whole situation.
Okay. Ulemin hayom asher tziviti shoftim al ami Yisrael. Anichoti lecha mikol oivecha v'yigid lecha Adonai ki bayit yaseh lecha Adonai. And from that day that I commanded the shoftim, the judges on my people Israel, anichoti lecha.
I give you rest from all your enemies.
Okay, and I give you rest from all your enemies. V'higid lecha, and
now says Hashem, v'higid lecha Hashem. And now God is. We're getting very nested speech here. God is quoting God in his conversation with Natan, telling Natan, this is what you should say to David.
Right.
Right? Tell David, Hashem says that Ki bayit yaseh lecha Hashem.
Right. That you're gonna make a house for God.
The other way around.
Oh.
God's gonna make a house for you.
Uh-huh.
You, David, thought you were building a house for me. You're not. I'm building a house for you.
Uh-huh.
And this word bayit, by the way, comes up more, I think, in this parak than anywhere else in Nach.
I think Uzi got the better end of the deal, right?
Right. Ki yimlu yamecha v'shachavta et אבותיך, והקימותי את זרעך אחריך, אשר יצא ממך, והכינותי את ממלכתו. Because when your days are filled and you rest with your forefathers, I will bring up your progeny after you that comes from your loins, and I will establish your kingdom, their kingdom.
Right. V'achinote mamlachto, that he's going to continue the kingship, meaning you are now qualitatively different than your predecessor. Shaul's line has been wiped out, right? There was no continuation of his malchus, versus you, David. What you've done, what you've accomplished, is that you're the beginning of a dynasty. That's different. That's a different type of malchus. That's a malchus that perpetuates itself, and we're going to see what that implies. But what you've done is allowed us, meaning you, David, and me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to have such a relationship that I'm willing to invest in this being a permanent thing, or at least an ongoing thing. And so you started this conversation saying you're going to build a house for me. I'm going to teach you what it means to build a house. You can't build a house for me until you understand this concept.
Okay.
And sorry, the other thing I should mention, the only way that this works is if we had the parak before. The whole point of the parak before was to show that David is nothing other than a conduit of the Ratzon Hashem. Hashem can't enter into a relationship with someone who is on equal footing, because then whatever he invests, you don't know what the person's going to do with it, right? They might follow your Ratzon, they might not. They might go take it and do something terrible with it. David proved in the last parak, no, my entire self is dedicated to being a conduit for what Hashem wants. So, if that's the case, as Hashem, then I'm willing to invest in that.
Right. Okay. Hu yivne bayit lishmi uvechonanti et kisei mamlachto ad olam. So the guy in the future who comes after you're gone, he's going to build a house in my name, and something established the throne.
Yeah, and I'll establish his throne forever.
Of his kingdom until forever.
So this is the culmination of the process that we started back when we were doing Megillas Rus, where we talked about being chosen by Kadosh Baruch Hu. This is the culmination of that, where God is choosing a specific family to represent Malchus eternally.
Ani egia lo la'av, v'hu yeh li levein, asher baha'avoto hochachtiv b'shevet anashim u'nigei b'nei adam. So I will be with him like a father, and he will be to me like a son. That
when he does an avon, when he does wrong,
and I'm gonna rebuke him.
I'll whack him with a stick.
Oh.
I'll chastise him. I'll give him a patch.
Okay. Anashim uvnige b'nei adam. Of people and heads of mankind.
I'll punish him with the stick of human beings, and with the afflictions that people get. In other words, I know that this is a tenuous thing to invest in this kind of permanent relationship, to pick one family and say, no matter what your kids do, I'm sticking with you. Well, what if they screw up? Okay, I'll tell you what I'm going to do if they screw up. I'm going to give them a patch, right? But what I'm not going to do is cast them out. What I'm not going to do is what I did with Shaul, where I took it back, right? He gave the malchus to Shaul. Shaul blew it. He took it away from him and gave it to someone else. That will not happen with you, David. I will not take malchus away from you and give it to somebody else who will then become the new David. There is not going to be a new David. Your kids your generations may sin, and I may have to punish them, but I'll do it the way a loving father does it, and not. Yeah.
That's why it says father-son relationship.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
V'chasti lo yasur mimenu kasher hasiroti me'im Shaul asher hasiroti milfanecha. And my kindness will not be removed from us, like I removed it from Shaul.
No, mimenu. Yeah, it's. I won't remove my favor from him
Right,
or from those generations.
right. Like I removed it from Shaul, that that was removed from before you.
Right.
Okay, v'neman beitcha umamlachtecha ad olam lefenecha kisacha yeh nachon ad olam. And your house will be faithful. I mean, I guess enduring would be a better word. Umamlachta, and your kingdom until eternity before you. Your throne will be, I guess,
Established
solid.
forever, yeah.
Solid until forever.
Right. One more pasuk.
Kechol hadvarim ha'ele uchechol hachizayon hazeh kain diber Natan el David. And like all of these words and all this vision, so did Natan say to David.
Okay, so what we had just read up until pasuk 17 was God having a conversation with Natan at night, telling Natan this is what you should say. We got the whole speech, and then the last pasuk is, and that all transpired. Natan faithfully relayed the message to David. Okay, how does this sit with everybody? I'll ask you a Hanukkah-related question. Is it true? Is everything we just read true? Were there any other kings to rule over the Jewish people other than the descendants of David? Hashmonayim, right? And
the kings of Israel.
The kings of Israel. And I don't know, Herod, we could throw out a whole bunch of names, right?
Yeah.
So how does that work?
They're getting punished
Problem?
for the bad stuff they did.
What does that mean?
Meaning, like, there were a bunch of Davidic kings who made some pretty grievous errors and pretty grievous mistakes. And, you know, they had to get punished for it. Maybe we're still being punished for it.
Okay. I like that. Yeah.
Or the other kings were not duly appointed and therefore are not established forever.
Right. In other words, God didn't say they should be kings. They chose to be kings, and we didn't necessarily agree with that halachically. Is this... Well, here, I'll read to you from Tehillim 89. Tehillim 89 is fascinating because it has both the sort of the echo of the promise that we just read, and then it has the opposite, the complaint against HaKadosh Baruch Hu for breaking that promise.
Who wrote it?
Tehillim 89? I don't know. Let's see. Maskil le'etan ha'ezrachi. Karasi brisi livchiri nishpati leDavid avdi. This is, I'm just going to bounce around because it's a very long parak. I made a covenant with my chosen one. I've sworn to my servant David. Ad olam achin zaracha uvanisi ledor vador kisacha sel. I will establish your offspring forever. I will confirm your throne for all generations. That's pasuk Dalet and Hey. It's actually really long, so I'm just going to do one or two more. Pasuk 30. V'samti la'ad zaro v'kiso kimei shamayim. I will establish his line forever, his throne as long as the heavens last. Im yazvu vanav torasi v'mishpati lo yelechun. If his sons forsake my teaching and do not live by my rules, im chukosai yechalelu mitzvosai lo yishmeru. They violate my laws and don't keep my commandments. V'kadati b'shev pisham b'negayim abonam. This is almost a straight quote from what we just read. I'm punish them their transgressions with the staff, with the rod, and their iniquity with plagues. V'chazdi lo afir me'imo v'lo eshaker b'munasi. I will not take away my steadfast love for him. I will not betray my faithfulness. Okay, then we get to 39. And this is very strong language, but it's in Tehillim, so I'm going to read it to you. V'yata zanachta v'tim'as his abarta im mishichecha. Yet you have rejected, spurned, and become enraged at your anointed. Ne'arta bris avadecha chilalta la'aretz nizro. You've repudiated the covenant with your servant. You have dragged his dignity in the dust. Paratza kol gederosav samta mivtzarav michita. You breached all his defenses, shattered his strongholds. Shasuhu kol over darech haya cherpa l'shchenav. All who pass by plunder him. He's become the butt of his neighbors. And it goes on like this for a while. Adonai nishpata leDavid b'unasecha. O Lord, where is your steadfast love of old, which you swore to David in your faithfulness? And I guess we'll leave it at that. The author of the psalm is confused by the same thing that we were just talking about. How is it possible that there was this promise from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and yet whoever it is at the time looks around and does not see a king from the line of David? And I think both answers that you gave are very valid. One is just because someone else is on the throne doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do halachically, and the other is it didn't come from nothing. It came from sin, right? Hashem said, if you sin, I'm going to do something about it. I'm not going to just leave them on the throne. Sometimes that relationship can be strained without breaking, meaning we're not expecting someone from another family to come and be Mashiach and lead the Jewish people. We're expecting someone who is Mashiach ben David. The reason we're expecting that is because we believe that this Shmuel was never abrogated completely. Maybe the children, the descendants of David, didn't merit to be on the throne at the time, but that doesn't mean that they're not still in line for it because of this promise. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Were the Jews sinning when like Yerovam became king? They were already sinning before. After Shlomo's death, Rechavam became king.
Even during, unfortunately, even during the times of Shlomo, things started going south. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Kingdom was split.
Yeah.
No, the kingdom was split in Rechavam's time.
Rechavam,
Right.
yeah,
Right after
Yerovam.
Shlomo.
Right.
Rechavam and Yerovam ben Nevat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shlomo made the mistakes.
Right.
All right. Keep going.
Yes. Now David does a highly unusual thing. Oh wait, sorry. There's one more point. Before you sat down to read this parak, if I had asked you why was David not allowed to build the Beit HaMikdash, you would have told me because
His head sheds too much blood.
Yeah.
Because that's
Where's
what it
that?
says. That's later.
But this is before
Right?
we said that because we know that. But
Isn't that the end of Shmuel bet?
You're saying that no, it's not the end of Shmuel bet either. That's what they teach you in like third grade. Like, oh, David couldn't build the Beis HaMikdash because he had blood on his hands,
Is it a
right?
Gemara?
it's in Divrei Yom.
Divrei Yomim, excellent. Yes, it is in Divrei Yomim. I just want to point out that it's not in Shmuel. Divrei Yomim kind of cleans up and tries to whatever. The Divrei Yomim is a different perspective than Shmuel. That's all I wanted to draw attention to. Okay, let's keep going.
Vayavo hamelech
Sefer Shmuel.
David
Not only
vayeshev
Sefer Shmuel.
lifnei Adonai
You've got
vayomer
one.
mi
Even Malachim
anochi
too. Yeah,
Adonai
fair.
Elohim umi veiti ki haviotani ad halom. And King David came and sat before God and said, "Who am I, Hashem Elohim?" Big name. And who is my house that I should that you should build me forever?
That you brought me this far. Have the Osani that you brought me ad halom until this place. So the rest of the parak is going to be David essentially davening that what he just heard should actually happen. The only thing I want to point out is that unlike basically every parak we've had before,
David
and-
accepts his kingship like without question, but
Well-
here he's like humble.
yes,
He's
all
kind
of that is true.
Almost shal-ish
Yeah.
in his humility.
Yeah, kind of meek and
Yeah.
every parak we've had before and every parak we will have afterwards, there is action taking place. People interact with each other. This entire parak is just recorded speech, with the one exception of David sitting down before God, which is an unusual thing. You're not supposed to sit down before God, right? You're supposed to have respect and stand.
It starts with the conversation between Natan and David.
Right. It's just recorded speech. This is the only thing that someone does that we get a recording of someone taking an action is David sitting before Hashem. Which I don't know how much I want to read into it. It is true halachically that kings from Malchus Beis David are allowed to sit in the Beis HaMikdash as opposed to everybody else who has to stand. But there's something personal about this. The way, like David hears nevuah from Natan, he's like, great, thanks. Doesn't send a message back through Natan like, please ask God if X, Y, Z. He goes out to the Aron, I assume, when it says Yoshev Lifnei Hashem, and just sits down and has a conversation to the Aron.
With God.
With God, right?
Which is the beginning of the Perek, which is why he has to be in peace.
Yeah.
Because otherwise he can't do that.
Right, very true. Vatiktan od zos be'einecha Adonai Elohim, v'tidaber gam el beis avdecha lemerachok, v'zos Toras ha'adam Adonai Elohim. Yet even this, O Hashem Elohim, has seemed too little for you. For you've spoken to of your servant's house, right? The focus here is always on the bayit of the distant future. V'zos Toras ha'adam. I have no idea how to translate this. JPS doesn't know how to translate this. They go with, may this be the law for the people. I don't know what to do with Torah Ha'adam. I'm going to just leave it as undefined. I don't know if anyone has alter or anyone else who wants to try a translation there. Uma Yosef David od ledaber. Now David is speaking about David in third person. What more can David say to you? Ledaber lecha v'ata yadata es avdecha Adonai Elohim, and you know me, you know your servant, O Hashem, ba'avur dvarecha kelibcha asisa es kol hagdula hazos lehodia es avdecha. For your sake, and because of your word, you brought all this great thing to your servant, and to make known to your servant. Al ken gadalta Adonai Elohim ki en kamocha. You are so great, Hashem Elohim. There's none like you. Vein Elohim zulasecha b'chol asher shamanu ba'aznenu. Everything that we've always heard in our ears. Umika amcha ki Yisrael goyecha ba'aretz. And who is like your people Yisrael, a singular nation in the land asher halchu Elohim lifdoslo la'am lasumlo shem la'asos lachem hagdula v'noraos la'artzecha mipnei amcha asher padisa lecha mimitzrayim goyim ve'lohav. His people winning renown for himself, doing great marvelous deeds for them, driving the other nations out of the land and their gods before your people who you redeemed from Mitzrayim. Vatichonein lecha es amcha Yisrael lecha la'am ad olam, and you've established your nation Yisrael to be a nation for you forever. V'yata Adonai hayisa lahem leluhim, and you Hashem have become their God. V'yata Adonai Elohim hadavar asher dibarta, and now Hashem, this that you spoke al avdecha about me, v'al beso hakem ad olam, that you're going to establish my house forever. Asak hasher dibarta, please do exactly what you promised to do. V'igdal shimcha ad olam lemor, and your name should become great forever, saying Adonai tzvos Elohim al Yisrael ubeis avdecha David yeh nachon lefanecha, Hashem, Lord of hosts, over Yisrael, and may the house of your servant David be established before you. Ki atah Adonai tzvos Elohim Yisrael galisa es ozen avdecha, you've now opened up the ears of your servant, saying, Lemor bais evne loch al kain matza avdecha es libo lihispalel alecha es atfila hazos. Because you're going to build this house for me, so your servant has ventured to offer this prayer before you. V'ata Adonai Elohim, atahu Elohim udvarecha you emet v'tidaber el avdecha es hatova hazos. And now Hashem, your words will surely come true. You made this gracious promise to your servant. V'yata hoel ubarech es beis avdecha. Now, since you've blessed the bias of your servant, lios leolam, to be perpetual forever, lefanecha ki ata Adonai Elohim tibarta. You Hashem have spoken. U'birchascha yivarach, and your blessing should be a blessing. Beis avdecha leolam, onto the house of your servant forever. That is the tefillah of David to Hashem. Yeah.
So what's with this revealed name of God, Hashem Elohim, used throughout the chapter? Anybody speak about that?
Why is he using Hashem Elohim?
Yeah.
I don't know.
When do we get back to that?
In like one pasuk.
Every other time.
in like literally two psukim.
He bases Torah Sodom. He explains it based on the Radak.
Mm-hmm.
So he's talking about he's talking about humility, with a lot of humility at that point.
Yeah.
Torah Sodom could be befitting Hadam for a great person. Could be fitting for a great person, not for me. Not for Radak.
Okay, so he's stressing, almost like we were saying about the last chapter, that he's stressing how lowly he is, so that he can be a vessel, a conduit for
Man of status.
Man of status.
Yeah. Does Nathan exit side left?
No, Natan is going to play a very big role in a couple of
goes in and
prophets.
out throughout the story.
Yeah.
His stuff is not big.
Yeah, he's going to be very, very consequential in a few prakim from now. But we will, please God, pick up again next week. Everyone's down for next week?
Hashem.
Mirza Hashem. This is the end, beautiful friend. Thank you for joining us on our journey of learning, and I hope you will tune in for another episode soon, Mirza Hashem. Be well.